Angie Macias, and I'll be taking it on from here. So, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the legislative branch. So, the legislative branch consists of Russia's Federal Assembly. It is deemed a bicameral legislature, meaning it consists of two chambers. The chambers are classified as the State Duma, which is the lower house, and the Federation Council, which is the upper house. The State Duma plays a big role in writing and passing laws. It is composed of 450 members who are elected for a 5-year term by a mixed electoral system. Half of the members, so 225 of them, are elected through a proportional representation system, while the other 225 are elected by a single member district system. The State Duma was established back in 1993 in the Moscow by Tarsan Nikola II after the revolution in 1905. During that time, the Duma would be dissolved whenever the Tsar was unsatisfied. However, the Duma's current structure was reformed by President Boris in 1993, who dismissed the old Soviet style and introduced a new constitution to the nation, which has led to the Duma now being considered the primary lawmaking body of Russia's legislative system. The main functions of the Duma are to introduce policies, debate federal laws, and decide whether to approve of them or not. The Duma also holds the ability to override the Federation Council veto with 2/3 majority vote. The Duma also holds the position to approve of the Prime Minister according to what the President nominates. If they are not satisfied with the Prime Minister, they can dismiss the Prime Minister through a simple vote of no confidence. If they are unsatisfied multiple times, the President holds the authority to fire the government or dissolve the Duma and hold new elections with fresh members. The Duma also approves of federal budgets and taxes. The government will run things through the Duma, that way the Duma can hold them accountable. On the other hand, we have the Federation Council, and it is the upper house of Russia's legislature, which is officially called the Federal Assembly. The Federation Council is in charge of reviewing and approving of the rules. The council consists of 170 members. It is set up in a way so each of Russia's 85 federal regions has 2 selected representatives. One of the region's representatives will be elected by the legislative branch, while the other is nominated by the region's governor. The Federation Council approves of laws that are passed by the Duma, meaning nothing can become a law unless both chambers have agreed. However, the council also holds a unique constitutional leverage, an example being that the council can authorize the use of Russia's armed forces and military outside of the nation. This means the Federation Council holds a major role in the decision of military use and foreign policies. The council can authorize a state of emergency or involve itself in the process of impeaching a president. As seen, the Federation Council may not create laws, but it has the leverage to approve or dismiss major decisions by the Duma. The council also works closely with the president and the Duma, showing how power is cemented at the top for Russia, making it a crucial role in the legislative body. Moving on, I'm going to also explain the judicial branch. So let's now talk about the judicial branch, specifically the Constitutional Court, which is the most important institution in Russia regarding legal matters. But moving on, it's really important to understand what the Constitutional Court does not do, since it can be a little confusing. The Constitutional Court does not act as a final court of appeal for criminal cases. That's going to actually be handled by another court called the Supreme Court of Russia. The Constitutional Court actually focuses on something a little different. It decides whether laws or presidential actions in Russia are constitutional. If a law is determined as a violation of the Constitution, then the court will strike it down. It has a crucial role in deciding what is legal within Russia's political system, theoretically. The Constitutional Court is composed of 11 judges who are nominated by the president and approved of by the Federation Council. These judges will serve until the age of 70 and are independent. However, many often follow the flow of the executive branch, like many other parts of the Russian government. The main role of the constitution of sorry, a main role of the court is the constitutional review. This means if there's a disagreement or a dispute over a law passed by the Duma or by the president, the court has the authority to step in and determine whether the law is unconstitutional. Overall, the Constitutional Court is part of the judiciary system, and its main role is to protect the Constitution itself. Before I get into the electoral system, I want to give a quick preview of Russia's party system. Russia has a multi-party system. Russia has a multi-party system, meaning multiple parties can run in the election, but it's been dominated by one party, which is United Russia, who strongly supports President Putin. There are other parties like the Democratic, Liberal, and Communist. However, they do not challenge United Russia. And then independent parties are critical parties. Independent parties or critical parties face censorship or legal obstacles that do not allow them to move forward with campaigns. Russia may look like a democracy, but the system is constructed in a form that protects the dominating party and limits its competition. As for the electoral system itself, Russia uses a mixed electoral system to elect members of the State Duma. As I previously mentioned, half of the members are chosen through single-member district, and the other half are chosen through proportional representation. Proportional representation are representatives chosen based on the votes of each party. Single-member districts are decided by voters, and the candidate with most votes receives a seat. Even though Russia uses this mixed system currently, it was not always so consistent. The mixed system has seen a shift over the years. Back in 1993, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia adopted a mixed system with the PR system and the SMD system. By the early 2000s, the system leaned towards a proportional representation system, making it difficult for independent candidates to run. The government at this time also raised the minimum amount of votes needed to enter the parliament, making it almost impossible for smaller parties to gain a seat. In 2007, Russia switched back to the proportional representation system fully, meaning only parties could run. This eliminated independent candidates as a whole. In 2016, the government switched back to a mixed model, but this time it came with tight restrictions. Independent candidates could run again, but it was difficult for them with all the restrictions they faced. By 2020, with the new constitutional reforms, new changes were introduced, such as electronic voting, multi-day elections, and more restrictions. So it may seem as if Russia has a functioning electoral system, but in reality, rules and restrictions are always changing in a manner where they protect the dominating party and limit the rest. Recent electoral reforms in Russia are very important to understand, because even though Russia still holds elections and technically has a multi-party system, these changes have made it a lot less competitive and much more controlled. In 2004, the Kremlin began tightening restrictions on who could run, and this led for independent candidates to have a harder time even registering. Smaller parties faced more obstacles than before to appear on ballots. The reform of 2007, where the government eliminated the mixed system, allowing only registered parties and no independents to run. During this time, the Duma also raised from 5% to 7%, which made it even harder for smaller parties to win a seat. In 2011, after major protests over election fraud and demands from the public, the mixed electoral system was brought back. However, independent or opposition candidates were still blocked from running and practicing. During the constitutional reform of 2020, more serious restrictions were introduced, the main one being the legal ban of candidates which with alleged ties to extremist organizations. This was a major move against Alexei Navalny and his organization. In 2020, the electronic voting was also introduced with the main purpose being to help voters access ballots but maintain safety. However, this was much easier to commit fraud. Throughout these reforms, we can see a pattern of change to maintain control for the dominating party. From limiting who runs to monitoring those who are running and reducing competition, but still maintaining an appearance of democracy, elections have seemed to be irrelevant. Moving forward, Russia is a federal state, which means power is divided between a central government in Moscow and the 85 regional governments. However, it has become very centralized, with the actual power being at the top with the president and the executive branch. During 1990, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the regional government had lots of authority and independence to manage their own regional affairs. However, after the take of Vladimir Putin, things began to change. Local dynamics began to shift with time. During regional elections in 2012, time restrictions were imposed, making it difficult for candidates to qualify, allowing the central government to determine who was allowed to run. And in an economic aspect, the central government controls majority of the budgetary resources, making regions financially dependent on Moscow. Even if a region does not politically agree with the central government, they can lose funding. This puts a lot of pressure on regional leaders to maintain loyalty. This can be described as an asymmetrical federalism, since some regions are granted more benefits depending on their strategic importance or their loyalty to the central government. In conclusion, the central government changed from decentralized in 1990 to a current centralized government. The Kremlin maintains legal tools and financial pressure to keep regions in check. Local government. Now let's look more closely at the local government in Russia and what it's supposed to do and how it fits into the larger power structure. Currently, local government have limited power. Over the last 2 decades, authority has been shifted upward to the regional or federal level. Local officials depend heavily on the regional government. Financially, local governments depend on the funding of the central government. Some places no longer elect mayors through the votes of the population, but instead mayors will be appointed by the central government. Overall, even though local governments exist, they function like administrative arms to the central state instead of independent bodies. This reflects how centralized the government has truly become. So, basically, to wrap everything up, Russia's political regime is built around a strongly centralized government, with the most of the authority concentrated in the hands of the executive branch and the president. Even though the nation seems to have a democratic construct through a parliament, elections, and multiple parties, this is designed in a way to maintain limited competition and reinforce the control at the top. The executive branch, which is led by the president, plays a strong role in shaping national policy, while the legislative branch, made up the State Duma and the Federation Council, is the ones responsible for creating and approving federal laws. The judicial branch, which includes the Constitutional Court, is tasked with interpreting the Constitution and resolving disputes between different branches and levels of government. However, it does not serve as a final appeal court for criminal cases. That role belongs to the Supreme Court, okay? Russia's electoral system has undergone several reforms since 1990, shifting between PR and SMD. These changes have deeply influenced how parties and candidates participate. The relationship between the local and central government has also faced major shifts. While the Constitution outlines a federal construct, the government has grown more and more centralized. Local governments continue to exist but with limited power and resources. In the end, Russia's political regime reflects a strong combination of federalism, democracy, and centralized features. This balance has evolved due to both internal and external influences. Thank you. And then that was it, guys. Thank you.